Hi everyone, I am Professor Reuben Bolt, Pro-Vice Chancellor Indigenous Leadership and Regional Outreach here at Charles Darwin University. I'm a descendant of the Yuin-Wendandian and Ngarigo peoples on the southeast coast of Australia. I acknowledge that our Casuarina campus here in Darwin is located on the lands of the Larrakian Nation. I also acknowledge that CDU has campuses on the lands of many other nations around this country and many global partnerships. I therefore acknowledge the First Nations peoples on each of these lands. So what does reconciliation mean to me? And what does this year's theme, "We're in this together," mean to me? Well, reconciliation is a loaded term, and like any other overarching term used by government, it can mean different things to different people. Now, if we consider the term in a practical sense, then reconciliation is the process of settling differences between two parties. But I think it's not as straightforward as that when it comes to Indigenous and non-Indigenous Australians, particularly when we consider the complexity of the colonial history context. Now, having said that, to answer the question, I think we need to agree on at least 4 key points. And the first one is that there is a difference of opinion. The second is that the context that informs our positions is valid in its own right. Third, there is a politics of recognition. And the fourth is that we should agree on the overarching goal or outcome of reconciliation, which is to achieve equality between Indigenous and non-Indigenous Australians. So let's unpack that. So 1, there is a difference of opinion. Indigenous Australians have never ceded their sovereignty, and there is no documented evidence that suggests otherwise. And importantly, this claim of sovereignty is not recognised by the Australian government. Now, on the other hand, the Australian government asserts its sovereignty, and that's in the context of the colonial expansion of Europe. And likewise, this sovereignty is not recognised by many Indigenous Australians. We must therefore acknowledge there is a difference of opinion. And for this specific issue, we're not going to resolve or reconcile these differences of opinion anytime soon. The second point is that we must acknowledge that the context that informs our positions is valid in its own right, and we must concede that each position is informed by the logic and discourse that gives these positions their validity and coherence. We don't have to agree with the logic, but we must agree that each perspective is important to each party. Thirdly, there is a politics of recognition that is swayed towards the West. And no matter which way you want to cut it, the facts are this. The British arrived in 1788 as a part of their colonial expansion. They claimed possession of the land through terra nullius, and they assumed governance and rule over the land using British legal instruments. This legal acquisition of the land is not accepted as such by Australia's Indigenous people. And this has been a site of contention for a very long time. And again, this is not something that will be easily reconcilable anytime soon. So then we should focus on the fourth point, which is to agree on the overarching goal or outcome of reconciliation, and that is to achieve equality between Indigenous and non-Indigenous Australians. So that is what reconciliation means to me. It's an opportunity to work together to develop strategies and programs that will address current issues in relation to the disparities between Indigenous and non-Indigenous Australians, specifically in the areas of health and employment and education. For me, the question goes further. We need to begin discussions on how Indigenous Australians can receive an equity share of the wealth in this nation. So let's work together to make this happen. We are in this together.